Over the course of the One Chicago franchise's 35 seasons, not including Chicago Justice, there have been 12 weddings. Unfortunately, not all of them ended in happily ever afters. One wedding didn't even get to the I do's. Nevertheless, love has been at the center of every One Chicago TV show, Chicago Fire, Chicago PD, and Chicago Med, meaning there have been plenty of nuptials to go around the Windy City. Since the One Chicago universe seemingly keeps expanding, we will likely have even more weddings to discuss and rank in the future. New romances pop up in Firehouse 51, The Intelligence Unit, and Gaffney Chicago Medical Center almost every season. Plus, some current couples in the procedural shows could get married in the future. For now, though, the popular NBC franchise contains many relationships that ended with the two characters walking down the aisle, 12, to be exact. 12. Natalie and Will. Chicago Med Season 4, Episode 9. As mentioned above, a One Chicago wedding ended prematurely, and that was Natalie Manning and Will Halstead's in Chicago Med Season 4. The two characters' relationship could only be compared to a roller coaster, and just when it felt like they could finally get a win, it was taken away from them. Instead of saying I do, the Burke family comes after Will, and the doctor ends up going into protective custody. The good news is that Will and Natalie managed to get their happy ending in Chicago Med. It just took them 8 seasons to get there. Nick Gelfus left Chicago Med after season 8, and the finale concluded with his character leaving Gaffney Chicago Medical Center, moving to Seattle to reconnect with Natalie. 11. Maggie and Ben. Chicago Med Season 5, Episode 17. Maggie and Ben in Chicago Med, 1. Unfortunately, Maggie Lockwood and Ben Campbell's romance in Chicago Med certainly wasn't the most memorable relationship in the One Chicago franchise, let alone in their own show. Their story was sweet, though. And it was satisfying to see Maggie happy on her wedding day, despite it taking place in a bowling alley. However, Maggie and Ben's marriage ended in a divorce in Season 9, which is part of the reason why their wedding is ranked low. 10. Charles and CECE. Chicago Med Season 4, Episode 22. Dr. Daniel Charles reconciling with his ex-wife, Caroline CECE. Charles in Chicago Med Season 4 was one of the show's most bittersweet stories. Yes, it was heartwarming to watch the two lovebirds wed again. Their Hawaiian-style nuptials were quite special. But, one couldn't help but feel at least a little bit of sadness when Charles and CECE said, I do, knowing that CECE was dying from lymphoma. She ultimately passed away in Season 5. 9. Halstead and Upton. Chicago PD Season 9, Episode 9. Haley Upton and Jay Halstead share a kiss in Chicago PD. While Jay Halstead and Haley Upton are, without a doubt, one of the most popular romances in the One Chicago universe, their wedding lacked excitement. It was a last-minute decision and featured none of their loved ones. Perhaps it went hand in hand with their relationship, but it was still a little disappointing. Nevertheless, the greatness of Halstead and Upton's love story was enough to make their courtroom wedding worthwhile, even if Halstead and Upton ultimately broke up in Chicago PD Season 10. 8. Burgess and Ruzek. Chicago PD Season 12, Episode 22. Chicago PD's Kim Burgess and Adam Ruzek's wedding in the Season 12 finale is the latest in a flurry of One Chicago weddings, and similar to Halstead and Upton's, it was disappointing. We didn't get to hear Burgess and Ruzek's vows, and the episode featured very little of the actual ceremony. After 12 seasons of a will they or won't they slow burn, the audience deserves a more satisfying ending. However, Burgess and Ruzek are iconic enough to warrant a higher placement. It also helps that other characters attended the wedding. 7. Bowden and Donna. Chicago Fire Season 2, Episode 22. Bowden and Donna get married at the firehouse in Chicago Fire. Former Chief Wallace Bowden and Donna Robbins had one of the healthiest relationships in the One Chicago franchise. They were surely the most stable of the Chicago Fire relationships. So, it was quite exciting to see them tie the knot. While Bowden and Donna's ceremony was about as perfect as any wedding could get, it ended in disaster as the characters faced an awful tragedy. After Bowden and Donna exchanged vows, Firehouse 51 was called to a fire towards the end of the Chicago Fire Season 2 finale. After arriving, the firefighters and paramedics headed inside, while Bowden waited outside. The chief lost communication with his team, and the building exploded. The episode ended with the audience unaware of the fates of almost every Chicago Fire character except for Bowden. Unfortunately, during the Season 3 premiere, viewers learned that Leslie Shea had died, which didn't make for the perfect ending to Bowden and Donna's wedding story, Casey and Dawson. Chicago Fire Season 5, Episode 8. Matt and Gabby, Chicago Fire, cropped. Matt Casey and Gabby Dawson were the it couple during the early years of the One Chicago franchise. So, their wedding was certainly a celebration for the characters and viewers alike. It took place in a courtroom like Halstead and Upton's, but unlike the Chicago PD couple, Casey and Dawson were surrounded by their Chicago Fire friends and family. It was a happy occasion, but it's a bit tainted knowing how Casey and Dawson's story ultimately ended. 5. Cruz and Chloe. Chicago Fire Season 8, Episode 19. Cruz kisses Chloe at their wedding in Chicago Fire. Joe Cruz went through a lot in Chicago Fire Season 8. He had just lost his best friend, Otis, and no one could blame him for feeling a certain type of way. On the other hand, one of the best days of Cruz's life happened in Season 8. He married the love of his life, Chloe Allen, in a beautiful ceremony surrounded by their loved ones. Otis's absence and presence were greatly felt, making Cruz and Chloe's big day one of the most beautiful weddings in the One Chicago universe, despite Cruz's stitches over his left eye, Casey and Brett. Chicago Fire Season 12, Episode 6. After Casey and Dawson's breakup in Chicago Fire, he got himself involved in a slow-burn romance with Sylvie Brett. Both were hesitant to give in to their feelings, seeing as they didn't want to hurt Dawson's feelings. Nevertheless, Casey and Brett eventually couldn't push down their attraction towards one another, and the two started dating in Season 10. Their relationship was short-lived, though. When Casey moved to Oregon, in spite of the distance between them, Casey and Brett never stopped loving each other. So, at the end of Chicago Fire Season 11, Casey returned to Chicago and proposed to Brett, and she said yes. The couple got married a few episodes into Season 12, and the ceremony was beautiful. It was held in an aquarium, and Bowden officiated, of course. It was the ideal end to Casey and Brett's story as they rode off into the sunset together, to Oregon, after their wedding. 3. April and Ethan. Chicago Med Season 8, Episode 9. The relationship between Ethan Choi and April Sexton in Chicago Med was quite a roller coaster, similar to many other One Chicago romances. However, all of their past strife doesn't matter because of how flawless their wedding was. April and Ethan got back together during the Season 8 premiere, and just 9 episodes later, they got married. Their nuptials were beautiful and served as the perfect way to write out Ethan's character, as he and April got the happy ending they had always deserved.